Well, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Ferndale City Council meeting for Monday, December 19th to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Certainly, Your Honor. Council members Baker. Here. Galloway.
Here.
Lennon.
Here.
Piana. Here. Mayor Coulter.
Here, yes, we have a quorum. Thank you very much. Next item would be the approval of the agenda. Is there any changes or questions about the agenda this evening?
I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Support.
It's moved by Lennon, supported by Galloway. Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Council members Baker. Yes. Galloway.
Yes.
Lennon.
Yes.
Piana. Yes. Mayor Coulter.
Yes, thank you. Our agenda is adopted. We have two presentations this evening. The first one, bittersweet for those of us on council, and I know on staff as well. This evening is the final council meeting for our colleague and friend Kate Baker, and we couldn't let this meeting pass without saying a few words and also presenting you with something, Kate. So
thanks, Dave.
I think they're going to get it.
Oh, good Lord.
Can't find the keys to it.
We just want to embarrass you. That's all.
It's the city car.
That's right. You got it.
Give her that.
1997 Crown Vic.
Yeah. 250,000.
Are these for blue? Yay. Thanks, Jerome.
Hope you like those.
They're beautiful. They're pink and purple. Why would I not like them? Like a 4-year-old in my color choices.
We also have a proclamation for you, Kate, that I'd like to read for you because I know people in the community have gotten to know you very well over the last 4 years, but just to remind folks a little bit about your history on this committee, on this council, I would like to read this. So, Kate Baker was elected to the Ferndale City Council on November 6, 2007, was appointed as Mayor Pro Tem on January 11, 2010, and served as acting mayor from January 1st to January 24th of this year.
Longest 24 days in my life.
During her tenure as a member of the Ferndale Council and Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Ferndale, Kate Baker has served her city and community as a member of the Employee Retirement System Board of Trustees, the Planning Commission, the Fire Chief Liaison Committee, the 8 Mile Boulevard Association, the Agenda Committee, the City Manager Liaison Committee, the City Clerk Liaison Committee, the Delegate to the Southeast Michigan Council of Government. Kate's dedication to the residents of Ferndale extends beyond her duties as a member of City Council, as evidenced by her generous donation of time and energy to community-based organizations including the Fern Care Free Clinic, the Ferndale Education Association, the DDA, Preservation Wayne, and Detroit Area Art Deco Society. During her 4 years as a member of the Planning Commission, Kate helped complete a growth, density, transit, and preservation-oriented master plan update and a comprehensive overhaul of our city's zoning ordinances. Kate has been on the forefront of maintaining the city's fiscal health and vibrance by creating community connections, building a team of progressive elected and appointed officials dedicated to keeping the city viable. Kate has significantly contributed to the growth and prosperity of the city by working diligently to promote Ferndale as a dynamic community in which to live and work. And we all extend our heartfelt appreciation for all of that and more that you have done. So let me just start by adding my personal comments, and I'm going to invite people on council to say a few words if they like. One of the things we didn't mention in this plaque is, I believe this is true, you were the youngest person ever elected to the Ferndale City Council.
So far.
So far, that's right. And, you know, I would imagine that in your first year, for a lot of people that don't know you well, that was probably one of the main things they knew about you. But I think it's a testament to your hard work and your maturity that 4 years later, I don't think people think of you as just the young person on council. When you stepped into the role as mayor earlier this year, I didn't hear a single person say, you know, is she up to that? Is she too young to do that? By 4 years later, Kate, everybody recognized you as a thoughtful and mature and steady leader in our community, and I think that says a lot about you. And I hope that as you leave council, you know it's already started, that people are asking you to serve on various things. And I know you want to be...
Included, sir.
And as have I. And I know you want to be, you want to pick and choose those because you want to step back your activities, but I hope you take that as the compliment that we mean it, that we offer you those various positions because we know that you are a capable and hardworking leader. And so I hope you take those as a compliment even if you turn them down. It's been a pleasure working with you, Kate. So let me present this to you
Thank
on
you,
behalf
Mayor.
of the council. And I'll take a hug.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And if my colleagues want to add anything at this point, that would be...
Well, I would like to say that last 4 years, sitting next to Kate, we've shared a lot of private laughs together over a few things. It's been quite interesting.
Don't get me in trouble.
No, I get myself in trouble too then. But what you bring to this table, your wit and your wisdom, I think is insurmountable. I've learned from you, you know, and I'm twice your age. But well, you'll be sorely missed, and I wish you well. But I know you, and I know you well enough that I know you're going to stay involved. But good luck, okay?
Thank you. Say he's the one who made me do it.
From 4 years ago or more, I guess, when I passed you that note suggesting that you run, we're really glad that you did, Kate. And, you know, aside from all the kind things that are said in the resolution and that the mayor and Councilman Lennon said, you know, I think what I'll remember you most is someone who was, you know, a very strong council person who wanted, had a clear vision of what was right for the city and what, you know, was a wrong direction for the city, and sticking with that vision even when doing something different might have been easier. From very early on in your time up here, I think you had that strength of your convictions, and it's really been a pleasure to work with someone who's as strong as you are.
Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you. Hug someone on tonight.
Well, I can point fingers back to Kate. She's the one who made me run for council, and I think, and Tamiko. And I think, Kate, I mean, you know, you're going to be sorely missed up here. I think you know that, and I probably will still be calling you for your timely advice and insight to help us think differently about how we could solve problems. And I think that's the, you know, the strongest attribute that I've found working up here at council is your ability to find new ways to solve problems. And I think that has been a very refreshing aspect of working with you. I also think you've been a very good leader for women.
Thank you.
And showing that there are opportunities for women who are in their mid-30s, 20s. When did you start?
27.
27, that there are opportunities for women in leadership in their community. And I think you plowed that path for them. And I think you're going to see your legacy grow from that. So thank you for serving.
Thank you. My mother would be very proud of you for saying that. I'm completely unprepared to answer any of those.
That's okay. You don't have to.
You don't have to, or you could wait till the end if you like and gather your thoughts.
Kind of where I was headed.
Okay, fair enough. We sort of surprised you with that, so we'll give you a chance to catch your breath. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. I was ready for financial audits.
I know, right? Well, then why don't we go into that? Our next presentation is our 2011 financial audit, and Jane Marie, do you want to introduce that item?
And I will introduce Aaron Stevens from Abraham and Gaffney, our city auditors. He has a presentation, and the financial statements are in front of you.
All right.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I promise I won't be as emotional. So, but all good news. A couple of quick general comments before I get to
Yeah, you never want to see your auditor crying. So.
Oh, Lord.
I promise that won't happen. Yeah. A couple of general comments before I get to the report itself. I'd like to thank Jane Marie and her staff, and as well as Tom Darling for their courtesy, cooperation, and assistance. Field work went very well again this year. We really appreciate all the help that we get while we're here, and it went very smoothly. The first letter that was in the packets, it doesn't have a title, but it does have our letterhead on it. It's what we refer to as the council communication letter. And it highlights the auditing standards that we followed and any significant points. And most of this is boilerplate language, but I would like to point out that there was a new accounting standard that was implemented for this fiscal year, and that is related to fund balance reporting and the governmental fund type definitions. And I'll touch on that when we talk about the general fund financial statements. What I plan to do is just highlight what I consider to be the key areas of the report. But if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and we can go through those at any time. With that, if you turn in the bound document that you have in front of you, just past the table of contents, is the independent auditor's report. And I always like to start out by saying that the purpose of an audit is to give you an opinion or opinions as to whether the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles. The purpose of an audit is not to detect fraud or give you an opinion on your internal controls. If we have suggestions about how to improve your internal controls, or if we do find fraud, we have a responsibility to communicate that to you. That's a byproduct of what we're really doing, and what we're doing is giving you an opinion on the financial statements, and that is included in the independent auditor's report on pages 1 and 2. And actually, there are more than one opinion in here. We have opinion units that we have to opine on, and the city received unqualified or clean opinions on each of those reporting units, which tells you that that the financial statements are presented in accordance with GAAP, and they're fairly stated in all material respects. Those opinions are actually given in the third paragraph on page 1. And you had 7 opinion units, which would include the governmental activities, business step activities, the aggregate discretely presented component units, each major fund, and you had 3 of those, and then the remaining fund information. On page 2, the last paragraph, again, we highlight the fact that there was a new accounting standard that was implemented for this fiscal year related to the fund balance reporting and fund type definitions. The pages that follow with the management's discussion and analysis, as the title would suggest, this is also management's responsibility as well as the financial statements themselves, the internal controls and so forth. What I'd like to do is focus the presentation on the fund level reporting, which actually starts on page 19. So page 19, we have a balance sheet, which is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2011, of your assets, liabilities, and fund balances. And this should be a more familiar presentation for you than the government-wide statements that preceded it. On pages 16 through 18, we have the government-wide statements, but page 19 starts the governmental fund financial statements. And we tend to focus on the general fund as the operating fund for the city. So in the left-hand column, we look to fund balance. And your total fund balance as of June 30th, the second number from the bottom, approximately $5 million, $4.9 million. The third number from the bottom is the unassigned portion. So as I said, we implemented, or you implemented GASB Statement 54 this year. And so you went from having reserved, unreserved, designated, and undesignated fund balance to non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And there are definitions in the notes that explain each of those categories. But again, just to hit what I consider to be the highlights, the unassigned portion of fund balance is what you have available for expenditure in future years. And that closely aligns with your unreserved, undesignated fund balance that you saw in previous reports. So your amount that's available is the $4,465,251. It's the third number from the bottom in the left-hand column. And that represents approximately 26% of your annual expenditures and other financing uses. So 26% of your outflows. In the previous year, your unreserved and undesignated fund balance was approximately 21%. So you actually improved in that area. A lot of times I'll get asked, what do we recommend? We recommend a minimum of 20% as a general rule of thumb, and that should give you approximately 2 months worth of operations before you needed to generate additional revenue. But that's a minimum, and that's a general rule of thumb, as I said. I would not consider 26% to be excessive by any means, especially today. With the uncertainty that you have surrounding your revenue sources, taxable values are expected to decline. Personal property taxes could be eliminated altogether. You have declining state shared revenues. Interest rates are still low. They've been low for years. So as your auditor, I would encourage you to maintain a healthy fund balance. this fiscal year, you made the cuts that you had to make, and I'll touch on that in a minute, and you actually added to your fund balance. So with that, if you turn to page 21, we have the operating statement. And this is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances, again, for the general, or the governmental funds, but focusing on the left-hand column, the general fund. Total revenues for the fiscal year were $16,992,000. That was a decrease of about 6% from 6% from the previous year, yes. Total expenditures also decreased. So your total expenditures, just below the middle of the page, $16,563,608. That was a decrease of about 12%. So again, I think you made the cuts that were necessary, and you brought those expenditures down, and you added to your fund balance. So the third number from the bottom, you added $109,760. Now, in comparison, for the year ended June 30, 2010, you used $704,000. So I guess to give you a visual perspective of that, I brought along some charts and graphs, and they had the outline here. The first page in is a 5-year bar graph of your general fund revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. And as you can see, over the course of the 5 years, you added to your fund balance in 2007, 8, and 11, and then you used fund balance in 2009 and 10. All along the 5-year period, I think you've maintained a healthy fund balance, but it's going to have its highs and lows. And as I said, at June 30, 2011, your unassigned portion of fund balance was 26% of your expenditures. I think that's a good place to be. This yellow bar is actually your total fund balance, not just your unassigned fund balance, so that you have to keep that in mind. So this is a little higher than 26%. But again, it gives you a visual perspective of the activity that you've had over the last 5 years and where your fund balance has been. The next page, we have a couple of pie charts that detail the composition of your general fund revenues and expenditures. The revenues on the top, the pie chart on the top. Property taxes is, of course, your largest source of revenue at 54%. Very consistent with 2010. It was 54% in 2010. That's followed by intergovernmental revenue at 21%, so that would be your federal, state, and local revenue sources. In 2010, that was at 20%. So in terms of where your money is coming from, very consistent with the previous year. The expenditures on the bottom, 65% for public safety, which would include police, fire, building inspection, and animal control, followed by general government at 25%. And again, fairly consistent with the previous year. I guess the main distinction here between last year and I say last year, I mean 2010 and 2011. In 2010, you had under other uses, liability insurance and some other costs that had been allocated in 2011. So your other uses in 2010 were at 11%, and this year they're at 3%. So you see that shift and spread to the other pieces of the pie. Next, if you'll go back to the bound document, and we're gonna go back a few pages here to page 88, which is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. The total expenditures of federal awards for the fiscal year was $1,424,410. The single audit threshold, which requires us to do additional compliance testing and so forth, that's triggered at $500,000. So you've needed a single audit for the past several years, and we expect that to continue. There are some reports that actually precede and follow that SEFA, that Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. But on page 92, we have a summarization of our results. Page 92 is the Schedule of Findings and Question Costs. We start out with a summary of auditors' results. The financial statements, as I said, we had an unqualified opinion on the financial statements themselves. We did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, so another positive note for you. Non-compliance material to the financial statements, no. We do have one issue of non-compliance related to the budget variances, but we didn't consider it to be material to the financial statements. So again, another positive note there. Under the next section, federal awards, We did not have any material weaknesses, or did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies related to the internal control over federal programs, major federal programs. The auditor's report on compliance for those major programs was also unqualified. That's a good thing, clean opinion. And we didn't have any findings related to the single audit. So, like I said, all good news. I think your general fund is in sound financial condition. We had one minor issue related to the budget variances, but no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies were identified.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions of council of our auditor?
Very good job.
Thank you.
Qualified is good.
Unqualified is good.
Well, this is your second time in front of us, I believe.
Third.
Third time?
Yep.
And just very nice to have your presentation is concise. I think it gets to what we need to know and provides a little bit of benchmarking so we can understand how we stack up against other folks. And it's nice to actually hear an opinion expressed on a couple different things. So,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming. All right, next on our agenda would be call to audience. Call to audience, as you know, is a half hour now. More time needed if at the end of the meeting. 3 minutes for any topic not on the agenda. And just so you know, since the main agenda item tonight is our interim financial report, if questions come up for people in the audience during that portion, we'll allow you to come up and ask them at that point. But for now, anything that's not on the agenda, feel free to come on up, give us your name and your address, and address council on any item. 3 minutes. Sherry Wells.
Yes, good evening. With the holiday coming up, there's going to be a lot of cardboard boxes and batteries and other stuff. And I went on the SACRA website, which I give right here. This follows up on Commissioner Covey's comments last time. If you have a box the size of your recycle bin, you can take apart the big cardboard boxes and stuff them in there. And as one of our police officers said, you want to put them so that the outside doesn't show, to show what goodies there are in the house that somebody may want to take from you. Or you can go up to SACRA when you're going to one of those shopping mall places up on Coolidge and 14 Mile Road across from Myers, and you can return the boxes, the cardboard boxes, turn them in without even having to disassemble them and break them down. Now, the SACRA website has a whole list of all kinds of places that you can take stuff instead of putting it in the trash that we have to pay more for. And one of them was UPS for these styrofoam peanuts. So I called Pack Mail, which is right here on Woodward, and they said they would be glad to take clean styrofoam peanuts also. So we can recycle them right here, which might be more inclined to do that if we don't have to go that far. What I do with the styrofoam, the big pieces of it that you get in boxes of stuff, is there's a place on West 8 Mile Road, 20000 West 8 Mile Road, that you can drop them off at any time. Batteries, when the kids wear them down within a day or two, those need to go into a plastic bag and they can go into your recycle bin too. One of the things we need to remember is that we get paid more for recyclables. The city gets paid back more for recyclables than we have to pay to have our trash hauled. And I was telling someone how exciting it would be if we had got more money in for recycling than we paid to have trash hauled. And so the resident asked me if that meant some taxes would go down. That's your problem. And Councilwoman Baker, when I was campaigning, someone said that she thought that Kate Baker was the voice of reason, and I had to give her the sad news that you weren't running again. What I have enjoyed most is that your urban planning is not just a degree, but it's something you once said you even get geeked about. So bunches of us are looking forward to more seeing Kate Baker geeked about urban planning.
I am a dork about it. Absolutely. I am.
Thanks, Sherry. Katie?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First, let me wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a very healthy New Year that will keep peace in this community. Katie Hirschberger, 750 West Maplehurst, long-term resident. I want to make a couple of comments on the traffic report of last week, which I thought was fantastic. I did not get a date on which they're going to straighten out the squiggle at 9 Mile and Pinecrest.
2013. I know.
Tomorrow isn't soon enough. Okay. One thing that concerned me about that traffic report was even the possibility of a roundabout at Livernois and 9 Mile. I consider the roundabouts that I have experienced in this geographic area to be dangerous. Specifically one that I got in the middle of at 15 and something out in West Bloomfield, and I thought I was going to get killed. And comment for Melanie on the signage. I am always concerned for the pedestrians and the bicyclers, not only in this community, but all over. Because the people in automobiles, so many of them do not think that anybody else has any right of way but them. Even here on Pinecrest, I come up all the side streets off of Woodward to Pinecrest on a very regular basis. And so many people have bushes and shrubs right at the corner of their property, and you literally have to pull out into the sidewalk area to see if there's oncoming traffic. And I consider that a hazard. Because if somebody's coming on a bike, especially at night, and they don't have lights, you could hit them very easily. And even some of the runners. They wear dark clothing. They don't have any sparkles on them that show up in headlights. And the pedestrians, I think, are really at a disadvantage because we are very anxious to make our way to wherever we're going. So I wouldn't mind seeing a sign. I mean, the no turn on red at 9 Mile and Woodward off of eastbound 9 Mile onto southbound Woodward, I think is one of the most dangerous because a lot of people cross there, and the people in that first right-hand lane, they don't want to wait because they've sat there at a light and they're ready to go. They want to get out there where they can go what they think is 40 miles an hour or more, and we know it's only 35. And there is a sign there that says no turn on red. Would it be permissible to consider even adding just one more thing to that very sign that says beware of pedestrians or something? You know, pedestrians have right-of-way. Just something to add it to one sign that would help maybe the people who are sitting in an automobile to stop and think about a pedestrian crossing Woodward Avenue. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
And I think what Melanie was getting at was that, you know, all the very points that you raised about designs of intersections being dark or obstructed, those are the things that would be the most helpful to avoid pedestrian, accidents. Mm-hmm. So what we want to do is see if we can address the situation with design fixes rather than just a sign that someone may fix.
Okay.
But good points.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think a sign is good enough, and I think we don't need to reconstruct the street in order to get a better solution that solves it. So I'm with you. Yeah. I really support safety for pedestrians. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, well, you guys.
Dave Cottrell from 1610 Bowfield. Regarding the improved street scrape on West 9 Mile, some thoughts that came afterwards is like concern that we have on Bowfield is cars cutting through. And I was wondering if we were going to reduce the traffic of the streets from like 5 lanes to 3 lanes. We already get cut-through traffic at exorbitant speeds. Is that going to increase the cut-through traffic? And is there any procedures in this plan to reduce the cut-through traffic? That was just one concern I had. And then regarding, a pedestrian crossing at busy intersections such as 9 and Woodward, I also have the concern where, sometimes you try and have eye contact with the driver, but in some cars which have very dark windshields, particularly the driver's side, you can't even have eye contact with them, and you don't even know if they see you. So I encourage the police department to give lots of tickets to people with those illegal black windshields. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening.
Howdy. Dennis Augustin, 1550 Spencer. I got a question for you. I spotted something here a while back, and all you's got that letter, I hope. Who is responsible for taking care of stuff like that? It concerned a tree, and depending on where you measured from that tree to that school that was nearby as to how close you were to that school actually. Who is responsible when you got a tree overhanging a sidewalk right on a main drag, and to get that tree off of there? I mean, it was overhanging a sidewalk there. I recorded it. I came in here and I got the runaround. It went from code enforcement to Byron Fertides down at DPW and back and forth. Okay? Now, I spotted it, I reported it. I thought that was a pretty good thing to do, considering the tree had overhung the sidewalk for well over a year. And I live down there on Spencer, and I've watched code enforcement come right down West End. Drove right on by this tree. You couldn't miss it because it wore a path out to where the people actually had to go out on the streets there. And I mean, this had little kids there going to that school, and those kids had to go out and around. Eventually, the moms started taking their kids across the street and that, but it just seemed like that, you know, if I can get nailed for a car sitting on brick pavers in my backyard, as soon as that car got there, what's going on with a tree overhanging the city sidewalk? And that, and I mean, who is, if you report something like that, and I got no problem with that, or if you see that, you know, a city car with the emblem on it driving by, who's supposed to, how is this supposed to be handled?
And I'm going to ask our city manager, I think were you aware of his letter and this issue?
Yes, and Mr. Delacourt was part of that process. I think it's a kind of a dual department, actually, both code and DPW. So I believe it's been addressed, correct, Derek?
Oh, yeah, it has been, because I walked right by it the day the guy cut it down finally, 2 weeks later.
Okay.
And that's when you guys got the letters, because I decided to write the letter that day and that. But it took 2 weeks of complaining and coming in here. You know, and I mean, it was in someone's backyard, and it fell across the sidewalk. And it laid like that for a long time, well over a year.
It should never take that long, and I appreciate that you wrote us the letter.
We are looking at our internal processes to make sure that
And
we have it identified who takes care of that.
You're right. It shouldn't take that long, Dennis.
I got a grandson that goes over to that school over there. And that, so I mean, you know, there's a whole bunch of little kids over there. And I mean, he doesn't come from my way down there. He comes from another way, but there are a lot of little kids that come through there, some with their moms and some without their moms. And that, but, you know, just kind of, you know, we have code enforcement. I get harassed because I parked the car on brick pavers. It was considered on grass, so I had to move the car. I now have a cement driveway back there, but I always thought brick pavers were, you know, being a contractor myself, you know, I go out to these $500,000, $1 million homes and they got brick pavers for driveways. I can't park a car on brick pavers in Ferndale, you know, and I mean, that was, and they're looking up between the houses to get in my backyard, you know, and here's something right in plain day, you know, plain as day. So, you know, something needs to be addressed there instead of being bounced around. You know, if it's happening to me, it's got to be happening to other people. You know, I mean, to do the right thing here, you know, and report stuff like that, you know, I'm sure everybody's got, you know, pretty busy with their jobs and that, but, you know, get a little help here and there once in a while, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, and I don't mind doing that kind of stuff, you know. I mean, if I see it wrong, and then somebody's got to take care of it, you know, but don't tell me that I got something wrong in my backyard and you got to go down into the neighborhood to get to my backyard when you can't see something out there plain as day.
Thank you, Dennis.
All right? Congratulations on your future endeavors there. I know we haven't always gotten along and agreed with everything, you know, that I've always said.
I think we get along pretty well.
But, you know, good luck with your future endeavors. Happy New Year's. Make it a safe one.
Thanks,
Merry
Dennis.
Christmas.
To you too, Dennis. Thank you.
Guys.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Linda Roberts. I'm going to read a lot of this because I'm real nervous, but I've owned and lived at 3300 Inman for 20 years. I would like a variance on ordinance 16-5 to be allowed to put 8 to 10 landscaping boulders that are 1 to 2 feet big on the parkway between the curb and the sidewalk in the front of my house. The ordinance reads, it should be unlawful for any person in the city, directly or indirectly, himself or by agent, clerk, or employee, to put, place, abandon, leave in, obstruct, or encumber any highway, alley, public place, sidewalk, or crosswalk with any animals, boxes, barrels, posts, fences, buildings, dirt, mud, stones, signs, posts, coals, bricks, building materials, rubbish, or any other material thing whatsoever, except at otherwise authorized by city council resolution. In all cases where 16.5 is violated, the owner, occupant, builder, or contractor shall remove the obstruction or encumbrance complained of within 24 hours of receiving a written notice, so to do so from the chief of police. Where personal service of such notice cannot be made, such notice shall be securely posted in a conspicuous place on said premises or abutting building. If the obstruction or encumbrance complained of is not removed in compliance with the aforesaid notice, city manager, at the request of the chief of police, shall cause the same to be removed to a suitable place in the city. Said obstruction or encumbrance shall be returned to the owner, occupant, builder, or contractor until the cost of such removal has been paid to the city treasurer and receipt thereof delivered to the city manager. Over the winter time, I have people across the street who continually plowed snow on that parkway, ripping up the grass. I called the police numerous times. They called the police numerous times. They talked to the people across the street, and nothing was ever done. No police orders were placed. Over the springtime, the people across the street started turning around in my driveway, making tire ruts, and I went to the police department and asked for a restraining order, but no police orders were filed, so I couldn't do that. But they said they'd go out to the man and talk to him. The very next day, I had tire ruts all the way across my parkway after the police talked to him. So then I started looking around Ferndale. I ride my bike a lot, and I noticed that there's a lot of houses with bricks around trees and pavers and this and that, barrels in front of their houses on the parkway. So I looked for an ordinance. I couldn't find one online. I came to City Hall. I talked to the people behind the counter, and the one lady gave me her name, said there is no ordinances, but check with DPW just to make sure. I checked with DPW. I talked to them. They said I could put anything. This is over late spring. I could put anything over on that patch of property, but if it's damaged by the city is not responsible. I said, fine. So then I went to Angelo's.
I need you to, you're at your 3 minutes, and I want to hear the end of your story, but I want you to.
Well, anyways, I put the boulders there. I put the landscaping boulders there. On November 21st, with no 24-hour notice, I came home from work. They were all picked up and thrown over the sidewalk on the other side of the grass, with the letter stuck in the door by Byron at the DPW director. I called the DPW the next day, and they said they didn't have to give me a 24-hour notice. The letter was good enough that they stuck in the door when they removed them. So the next week, I talked to April, the city manager. April wrote me a letter.
So at this point, I want to ask April.
Okay.
Now that you mentioned her, we'll ask
She's
April to pick up the
helping me
story
out
from here and let
some.
us know where she believes this is at, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. April, you're aware of this situation, I know?
I work with Ms. Roberts to work with the DPW department to try to come up with a common way to kind of deal with her situation with her neighbor. Byron agreed to let her keep a flour barrel and a boulder at the approach of her driveway to try to eliminate the neighbor from using her driveway and plowing snow within her driveway, as well as Mr. Petites also talked to that neighbor and told them that they cannot put snow in her yard or or utilize her yard for their snow use. So I advised Ms. Roberts to see if that works, and Byron indicated he would help us try to rectify the situation. But we did allow her one boulder and the flower pot in her in the median parkway area.
And that's not sufficient for you? You would like more?
It's good, but I don't believe it's enough. I believe I need more boulders there, because the day after the boulders removed, the man across the street put a big old tire rut out there and broke the neon pole marker at the one end of the grass, and the tire rut's about that deep. And then over the weekend, he squealed his tires as I'm walking back up to my house. So in addition to what you've worked out, there's no mention of him putting tire ruts out there, just not pushing snow over there. If I could put the boulders back, I definitely plan on, in the spring, replacing the boulders with bushes and tall grasses, but I have to get the property in good shape again. It's contaminated by road and driveway chemicals, basically. I can't even grow grass at one end of it. He's damaged it so bad. So that was my request, to put more boulders back there. Besides, one isn't going to do it.
And April, I take it the staff's recommendation to us is to support the compromise, I guess you could say, that you have.
And we're trying to help fix the problem with the neighbor, because it's very much a neighbor dispute as well. And if we can't, if it's not working, then we agree to continue to work with Ms. Roberts to try to come up to a resolution. And if that doesn't work, we'll go to Plan B. That's where we left it.
But I don't understand what good Byron's going to do if the police couldn't make any impact on him. I mean, the police talked to him. Byron's, the police are pretty impactful. And for Byron to talk to him also was really good. But I don't think that it's going to make all that much difference, especially since he spun his tires out right in front of me this weekend, showing his power over me. It's not stopping. And I'm so tired of it. I've been going through this for a couple years. Every year it gets worse. I'm sorry.
Is it a law enforcement, maybe, as opposed to a boulder issue, if this is a law enforcement issue, a neighbor harassment issue, perhaps it's something we can
It could be, Your
do
Honor,
from
that
that
we would have
perspective,
to-
Chief?
I mean, I don't doubt that she has issues with the neighbor, but again, we still have to catch him in the act.
That's
and
right.
one of these type of things, we have to have, or somebody that can affirmatively say that he saw him do something, because if we assume that he did, it's exactly what we're doing, is assuming. And it may be a valid assumption, but we would still have to be able to prove it.
And I've seen him do it, but 90% of the time I'm at work. He waits till I leave, but I have seen him do it, and the police have been called when I see him do it. But all they can do is talk to him. They can't give him a ticket because there's no ordinances against him doing what he's doing.
Well, there are laws against doing that if there's witnesses that saw him
See,
do
it doesn't matter. In fact, when I took
Well,
my
I'm going to have to end this conversation
Oh, I'm
now.
sorry.
I
Okay,
appreciate
so
all what you've done. I
is
want you to
there-
continue to work with our city manager. I think my sense is that we'll see if this compromise works, but keeping in mind your plight, I feel for you, and I'm sorry you're having this difficulty with your
So
neighbor.
no more boulders?
Yeah.
Just the one boulder, huh?
At
We're
this
just going to
point-
keep working through it, and if
Okay.
we'll continue to
I'm
monitor.
not putting any boulders out there then, because it's just like a slap in the face, so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman-elect Martin.
Good evening, Dan Martin, 1447 West Hazelhurst. I just want to add to what everybody else has said and thank Mayor Pro Tem Kate Baker for her service for the last 4 years. I tremendously appreciate it. I first met you when you were campaigning 4 years ago, and you were
Knocking on your door, probably.
I pulled off a pine crest because you're knocking on somebody's door. And you were an incredibly impressive candidate, and you've met and exceeded everyone's expectations and beyond. So thank you so much for your service and your leadership. It's a real honor to come in behind you. I can't replace you, but certainly you've served a great example. So thank you for everything. Thank you.
Now you get to hang out with Mike.
You're in trouble.
Katie for a second time.
This is a short one.
Yep.
One of the pleasures and blessings in my life has been watching Kate Baker grow up. And she lived across me from the time she was in elementary school, I guess. And you were still going to Roosevelt. And I've watched her grow, and she has been one of those people who, when you look back on it, you say, my, wasn't it great to know her when? Thank you, Kate, for all your work and service.
Thanks, Katie. Anyone else for call to audience this evening? Seeing none, I will close call to audience. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Consent agenda items are items that we consider routine, and we pass in one vote. Let me read the 3 consent agenda items this evening. The approval to adopt the financial policy as submitted by the Assistant City Manager / Finance Director / Treasurer. She wears many hats. Approval to, excuse me, approval to adopt the purchasing policy as submitted by the same person. And approval of the sick leave extension for a fire department employee as submitted by the fire chief. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Baker, supported by Galloway. Are there any comments on the consent agenda?
6B.
Pardon me?
6B, purchasing policy.
B as in boy?
B has been asked to be removed from the consent agenda.
I would amend my motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item B as in boy.
Yeah, I would support that.
Moved by Baker, supported by Galloway. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Council members, excuse me, Galloway,
Yes.
Piana,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Mayor Coulter.
Yes, thank you. That item, the consent agenda is adopted. Now moving on to our regular agenda, and, well, I'll do them in reverse order, Dave, just for you. Why don't you come on up and tell us what you want to talk about in regards to the purchasing policy?
Talked a bit on this already. Dave Cottrell, 1610 Bellfield. On the purchasing policy, first, I think, Jane, I think Marie Eubanks for assembling the whole purchasing policy so we get to know what the whole thing is. Really glad she did that. You know, yes, I don't usually like the buy local policy because I think it can be, just like yes, in the city of Detroit, it can have ways of getting corruption or, you know, unintended consequences through it. In Section 6, the bid award, preference of competitive bids, just the definition of city-based, like, okay, what is that? Does that include post office boxes or sales offices in Ferndale, or I'd like a much better definition.
I'm sorry, where are you referring?
And the purchasing policies, Section 6, the bid award, and is under preference of competitive bids. The definition of city-based, company, you know, okay, what's a city-based company? Is that a post office box?
I don't see it.
It is item number 2.
There it is.
Right.
Page 7
Okay.
at the bottom.
There is a definition right above in subpart J of what constitutes
Okay.
a city-based company.
Located within the city,
Okay.
which has made a payment of commercial industrial property taxes.
Right, okay. I should see that, but in trying to get more information so I could, you know, have reasonable comments, I was trying to contact like the National Institute of Government Purchasing or the Michigan Public Purchasing Officers Association, and Michigan Public Purchasing Officers Association, the yearly membership is like $70. You know, can't join that because I'm not a government purchasing agent, but perhaps it might be useful for the finance director to be a member of that organization and be able to see what are good purchasing policies for governments such as Ferndale. I believe the city of Clawson is a member of that organization, and, you know, several other organizations. So it could be helpful in getting, okay, what the policy that we should have, or we have a good policy now, at least we've assembled it all. Perhaps it would be better if we could see what model purchasing policies are and be able to read purchase policy papers regarding public buying or buying local, so we make the right decisions and aware of the problems. So I guess that's just my suggestion, or hopeful that the finance director might become part of either the Michigan Public Purchasing Association or the National Institute of Government Association, so we can make sure we're having the right policies in Ferndale and keeping track of our dollars. So that's my comments. So thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
Any comments or questions of council?
Nope, I think this was a fantastic policy when it was presented to council, and it's definitely an upgrade and clarifies some of the policies that we had on the books, and I think this is a really good policy to take us forward. So.
Seeing no further comments, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I need to make a motion.
Oh, that's right.
I
Do that
move
once the meeting,
to
I
adopt the
swear.
attached purchasing policy.
Thank you. Moved by Piana. Seconded by Lennon. All right. Additional comments or questions?
I guess my only comments would be that acknowledging that we don't have a purchasing agent and haven't had one in a decade or so. We do at least have a new HR person coming in that really doesn't align with purchasing. Perhaps there's room for someone to join an association, but I wouldn't want to pay a fee for someone who doesn't have time to attend meetings. I feel like we tried to get away from that on council, but joining organizations just for the sake of joining them. So I'm sure that the city manager and the assistant city manager will let us know if there are any organizations that they see that would be a benefit. They do have budgets for those types of memberships.
And I guess I would just also add, just to provide some context for people listening at home, the concern about any sort of fraud or self-dealing on this is sort of addressed in the policy itself, and the exposure of the city is fairly limited in that bids for work or items, any preference is limited to 3% for bids of $100,000 or less, so that's $3,000. And for those contracts above $100,000, of which there's a very limited number in the city, we had one of our bigger ones for the fire truck. There's no fire truck manufacturers that I'm aware of in the city, but that would have been a 1%. We could have varied from the lowest bid by 1%. So in that example, up to $3,000 for the higher amount, and 1% for amounts exceeding 100,000. The biggest bid being 800,000 would have been potentially some sort of mishandling of $8,000. So I don't think this is a huge area for potential self-dealing, and it's limited by the policy itself.
Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmembers Lennon?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Now, item A on our regular agenda, the interim financial forecast. City Manager, you want to tee that item up for us?
I'm actually going to turn it over to Ms. Eubanks, who has put together a small PowerPoint to kind of highlight some of the major budget adjustments for the fiscal year ending 2012 budget year. And anytime during her presentation, please feel free to stop and ask questions, and we can discuss as we go through. So with that, I'll give it to Jane Marie.
Well, as we've presented in previous years, there's hundreds of changes that can be identified during the interim process, and what we try and do is consolidate them into a couple of notable changes that are identified during this process, which is going out and soliciting input from the department heads, as well as information that we may have a little bit more honed information on revenue side. So to, again, pull those down into a few notable items. Revenue notable items in City Council, we have property taxes. There was a slight adjustment downwards of property taxes, but mostly what you see on the report that follows the narrative is just showing the amounts as the base operating millage and then the voted operating millage. So no real change in the dollar amount collected there, just notating. I think it's important as we move forward that we notate the difference in our voted millage. We have a number of them between our general operating millage, our library millage, the DDA 2 mil levy. So I think it's important to note those separately because those are subject to change as those millages expire. The second one is state shared revenue increased just under $100,000. for three main reasons. The first is the unanticipated payment of the statutory portion, the last statutory portion of, that we were getting from the state.
Jane Marie, I think you said $100,000, but I think you meant $1 million.
$1 million,
correct?
just under $1 million, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
About $400,000 in statutory revenue. We were told that statutory revenue was ending June 30th, and we anticipated that that would be our June 30th. It was actually collections by the state through June 30th, which they don't distribute to us until August. So we did notate that in the interim. The second one is the EVIP program, which we discussed as part of the budget during 2012 and 13's budget process. At the time we adopted the budget, there were no rules for obtaining EVIP payments. We did not know what we could possibly anticipate because we didn't know what parameters the state was going to decide how to distribute those funds. We have since found out it's a three-step method. We have applied and succeeded in the first method. The second method is due January 1st. We anticipate the second and the third method us qualifying for, so we anticipate the payments between October 1st and the end of the year being about $700,000. And the final adjustment was an anticipated loss of about $85,000 in the constitutional portion, and that would be a reduction in state collections that just flow through to us. The next one is an increase in district court fines of about $465,000. That is based on collections to date and was recommended by the court of what they anticipate for the rest of the year based on what they've collected so far. The next one is finance, budget and financial analysis. An anticipated loss of about $400,000 in interest. As you may recall, we budgeted about $500,000 in interest earnings based on collections so far. I would be surprised if we got $100,000 by the end of the year. Some of our investments are decreasing in value, as we've seen in every investment in our pension funds. Just the dependability of interest earnings just isn't there anymore. The second one, excuse me, is the increase of about $235,000 from multiple sources. MIRMA, who's our insurance pool, gave another distribution to us of excess funding, which means amounts that we have contributed to MIRMA over the years that have not been used for claims. And this is, you know, the pool of all the entities that are part of the MIRMA pool. The second one is the ERRP reimbursement that Mark Wollenweber worked on with a third-party agent to have us get reimbursement for that and the RDS, which are retiree contribution or reimbursement for drug claims. April finished up that project, and so based on that, we're anticipating an increase of about $235,000 for those three items.
Jane Marie, on that point,
Sure.
would that figure be expected to be a one-time or ongoing increase?
It would probably be a couple of times, not in that dollar amount, because we actually got 2010 and 2011 funds. We may get 2012 as well. But with most federal programs, there's certainly a lot of information that you get at first, and then you end up only getting funding for a couple years. And that's pretty much what's anticipated with the IRP or the RDS money.
As well as just a couple with that, the Obamacare that's supposed to come in 2014 could end up, that might not come into fruition anymore as well either. So let's try to offset costs for those that are, I believe it's in between when you retire and your Medicare are part of it. And then for those that when we offer Medicare benefits, we get somewhat of a reimbursement for the RDS as well. So that could all go in 2014 as well.
Cable TV, Aaron Stevens alluded to this slightly. It was in a separate fund. Based on recent GASB directives, it can no longer be considered a special revenue fund. It had to be brought into general fund. So you'll see that both on the revenue side and the expenditure side, the bringing back of about $100,000 worth of revenue and slightly less in expense. Police Department, about a $100,000 increase or decrease to the expenditures, or revenue, I'm sorry, from drug forfeiture. We had planned on a contribution from drug forfeiture to support enforcement, and we are recommending that that be deferred to possibly a future year because of the increase in state shared revenue. And we also have some smaller adjustments to the budget because of the change in impound procedures that Chief Collins has talked about earlier in the year. Fire Department, this also, like cable TV, is both a revenue adjustment and an expenditure adjustment. We were granted the SAFER grant after we had adopted the budget. It's going to be an equal increase to expense and revenue, about $350,000, which is an estimate of the 4 returning firefighters, now reduced to 3 since 1 firefighter has left. So again, you'll see that on the expenditure side. Community services, $50,000 increase in rental fees. That's rental inspection fees due to efficiencies in the processes of getting the inspectors out and doing those inspections. Public Service Department, really just a documentation change, removing those smaller departments, which sidewalk was considered a separate department, moving that into public service. We see the same thing excuse me, in grass and weeds to community services. Then to go to the expenditure side, District Court, we're recommending $235,000 contribution to Public Improvement Fund based on the court's recommendation to bring back this contribution, which is an exact offset of their, thank you, of their specially designated building fee that they instituted a number of years ago to put aside hopefully for a future new or renovated court facility. Cable TV, again, just being brought back into the general fund like it had been a number of years ago. Police Department, about an $80,000 increase in overtime due to special events and vacancies and covering those personnel changes. Fire Department, SAFER grant, $350,000. With all federal grants, as you saw in that CFA report as part of the financial statements, expense has to be offset exactly by revenue with grant revenue. So that's what we have here. Central Services, recommendation to contribute $100,000 to Public Improvement Fund. We have used the Public Improvement Fund over the last couple of years, the most notable being the renovation of this building in order that we could see about $200,000 in annual personnel savings by staff reductions and having 1 service counter instead of 6 service counters. Because we've done some major renovations and had some notable expenditures in public improvement, that has been brought down to a level that if we needed to react quickly to some type of infrastructure need, it would be precarious. And finally, a $200,000 contribution to each the Major and Local Streets Fund, a total of $400,000, increased to provide those funds with minimum operating funding in order to defer the increased maintenance costs the streets require as part of the 1994 voted bonds. Those streets average between 10 and 18 years now. The average street before you need to start doing major repairs is about 15 years. So they are coming close to their the last of their expected life before they need major renovations. So that's in order to give those funds a bolster to head off. You know, as you realize during the budget process, the bond payoff is not until 2016, so we still have a number of years before any decisions would probably be made about additional funding for streets. And that sums it up.
Well, thank you very much, Jane Marie. Hope you
Thank you.
Take a moment to enjoy that water and clear your throat. So I'll open it up to questions from council first, and then I'll also invite anyone from the audience if they have any questions on where we are financially. I guess let me start with a couple of things. Chief, I'm going to direct the first one to you. One of the things I learned as a county commissioner from Sheriff Bouchard, he taught us a good policy, which I saw the wisdom of, which was, our policy was, we don't use drug forfeiture money for ongoing items like salaries, and it should always be used for one-time expenses, and for the very logical reason that you don't want your law enforcement personnel to believe that their salaries are dependent on the number of drugs that they confiscate, thereby possibly incentivizing them to be more aggressive than they otherwise might be. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that? I mean, in the best of worlds, I suppose. Do you agree with that philosophy?
I do, and in fact, although the state statute has just changed that allows for the use of state forfeiture money for salaries. That was prohibited before this unless you had certain circumstances. The federal drug forfeiture law prohibits the use of paying for any drug officer that's assigned to a federal unit, which we have both. So we cannot use any monies that and still to this day, we cannot use any monies that we garner from the federal government to pay for the officer that's assigned to the federal task force. We can use that money in limited circumstances to pay for a task force officer or a officer in his first year of employment only. So we have, over the last, I'm guessing, at least 12 years, contributed the salary of one police officer that's been assigned out to a various task force over the years. We've when we have that money, we agree that that's a good thing. We are very conscious of that very fact, though, because the federal government is true. You don't want, I mean, that's the reason they do that is for what Sheriff Bouchard said and what the federal government says, is that you don't want a police officer going out there and trying to make his own salary by bringing in drug forfeiture. So as an overall policy, yes, I agree. But as a practical matter in today's world, if that's what makes it to keep boots on the ground, then we're happy to make that contribution. And we have for many, many years. But if this goes back in and we can either hold it and if things go south on us, or I'm pretty sure I can come up with those one-time expenses that you're talking about, Your Honor. Pretty sure there's gadgets out there that we can figure out to fight crime.
Appreciate it, but I'm happy to see we don't have to use those revenues for that this year, and with any luck we'll be able to stick to that. Jane Marie, a question for you on the contributions to central services that you mentioned at the end. $100,000 for public improvement, $400,000 for streets, which I agree, our streets are nearing the end of their useful life if they haven't gone over. And so I agree that we have to, and we've made no contribution to those this year, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't disagree, but I'm wondering about whether or not, just for our own flexibility, not knowing what's going to happen next year, if we put them in those restricted funds, they're restricted to those purposes, correct?
Yes, they are.
And not to say that those purposes aren't valid, but if we simply left those funds in the general fund, we could use them for those purposes, or, barring unforeseen things, or to help keep the millage rate low or other reasons, we would have the flexibility to do that. Would you agree with that? And what would your thoughts be about identifying the need for public improvements, but leaving it in the fund balance, in the general fund balance, where there would be flexibility in case we needed it for something else.
If you don't make those three adjustments, the 200 each to local and to major, and the 100 to public improvement fund, then all other things being equal, that $500,000 would increase the fund balance at the end of the year.
Yep.
So could you keep, do the other adjustments except for those three and have that flexibility in the budget? Sure, you could. We go through this review process, in effect, the interim process, kind of behind the scenes, as we're going to adopt the following year's budget. So I go back and I review changes that have happened. So if something looked a better priority of where to put your funding, could you make that change as part of 2013's final adopted budget or revised budget now that we've adopted it? Sure, you could.
Okay. And I say that just so people understand, because I agree with you that those funds are needed in public improvement. But we're facing a situation next year where we're hoping to keep, we have flexibility with the millage rate, and we're hoping to keep it as low as possible. And there's some unexpected things that could happen in terms of property tax, personal property taxes and the like. And so leaving that money there to help either keep the millage rate down or fund unanticipated loss of revenue in other places may just be more flexible for us. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, if I may. I hear your need for flexibility and having the quick reflexes to deal with risks, unknown risks that may occur. I was wondering, though, if it's important for us to take in consideration, if we're doing this capital improvement plan and we are looking to redo some streets, how does this align with that new process? If we're planning for it and we've targeted it as a priority and we know we want to do it, how do we align and meet your need for flexibility, but make sure that we actually go ahead and invest in that? So how do we close that gap? Because both of those interests are important to me. So just that we don't forget about it because it's sitting in the general fund. So that's sort of my question.
And that's why I prefer to have things in the right pots, I guess. It sends a. We know that our spendable dollars from the state that are earmarked for roads are continually decreasing. So to allow our DPW and our city manager the ability to do the long-term planning that they want, do any grant matching planning that they need to do. I mean,
that's a great point.
Byron knows what he's got coming up. April and Jane Marie, know what's potentially on the horizon. I guess again, completely understanding and respecting your desire for more flexibility in the general fund, I see a very valid reason to move things into more sequestered funds because it gives us more commitment and direction, I guess, for our projects next year.
I guess my thoughts on it are that I don't necessarily disagree with any of the comments here or from Jane Marie, but I think the idea that we have to somehow restrict our options in the future assumes that we won't have the discipline to do the right thing when that time comes. I've been up here for 10 years, and I think with the exception of perhaps a few years in the beginning, we've always been able to, make the right decisions. This year's budget audit, I think, really supports that, in that and I was just telling Councilman-elect Martin on the way in, this has been one of the most challenging years we've ever faced, I think, as a city council. And despite that, we increased our fund balance, our unassigned fund balance. So I'm not concerned about this next council anyhow having the discipline to not spend unwisely. And but I'm also concerned, what's going to happen regarding next year's projections on property values and what kind of revenue we're going to bring in, and how the perhaps personal property tax issue shakes out. So I'd like to have the flexibility as we go forward. This will increase our general fund balance, if I heard correctly, by $1 million this year. I think we've got enough wiggle room to leave it in the unassigned general fund.
And to speak,
Sorry.
Oh, you want to-
Once you put that money into a respective fund, can it be removed and put back into the general fund? Or if you put it in for public,
Well, once something is in a special revenue fund, it's really restricted for that purpose. But creating budget for it does not
Right.
create the funding.
okay, gotcha.
But when the revenue didn't come in for that purpose, I mean, if we're talking the water and sewer fund and we collect revenue specifically for that purpose, we can't take them out and pay a cop with them. But if we take general fund money, put it in the public improvement fund, and push comes to shove and everything goes to pot next year, and you need to move money out, we're not breaking our charter by moving money out of something we've restricted ourselves. are we?
Well, you
I
can
don't
take
think.
it back out, you can make a budget adjustment and take it back out through June 30th. Once it's in at June 30th, the contribution has been made.
There we go.
My understanding is no, you can't take it out then and use it for other things.
Which is also another good point. We don't have to decide this tonight, but we just need to give April and Jane Marie some thoughts and direction in terms of what we're thinking, which is why this is a good conversation.
Well, I think that if we have a specific designated need where we know that we have to spend this money to do a certain project, and that's critical to the future of the city, then sticking it in there is perhaps a good idea. But from the presentation, I heard that this is sort of a jumpstart, a way to help out these funds when we know that they're going to need help in a few years, but they don't need it right now. So I guess I'm opposed to it just as a way of limiting ourselves when we don't have anything specific in mind. If we were going to put in the roundabout or something, and we needed $400,000 to do that, and we decided that that was a good thing, then I think we should do something to make sure that that money's there after we start down that path of hiring engineers and letting construction contracts. But at this point, it seems a little premature to me.
Well, I think there's some, maybe we can find some common ground, because I know that the council here wants to do some strategic planning, and I know we are going to be implementing the capital improvements plan for the first time in its full glory, full process, and so I think that may help us come to what are we going to fund, and where do these fit in the certain funds, and then you'll have more certainty of what you're redirecting funds from the general fund into the specific restricted fund. So, so at least we have a process in place to move forward and identify and prioritize these projects over the next 6 months. So I feel confident that we can meet both of our needs.
I guess I would just still challenge that if you went back to our budget binders, you would see, and unfortunately our DPW director isn't here tonight, but you would see at least a preliminary plan for the next maybe 4 years of local and major streets projects. So it's not like we're just, picking things out of the air. There is a preliminary plan there, and there is, at least a fair estimate of what the ongoing maintenance will cost, aside from any other new capital projects, just the ongoing maintenance of things. And I would also argue that next year is when you guys are going to have to contribute to the local and major streets funds, not in a couple of years, because it's nearly gone.
And I guess I don't disagree with that, and I would expect that we would put that aside temporarily until we see how personal property tax shakes out, other things shake out, and then move some, if not all of that money there. But I guess just for purposes of, if we need some of it for something else, if it comes down to boots on the street or delaying a street repair for a year, we might want to decide to go with the personnel. So,
Fair enough. Yeah.
any other comments, not just about that, but on any other part of Jane Marie's presentation, which was very nice, by the way, Jane Marie. Appreciate it. And maybe earlier than we done it in the past?
A bit
A
earlier,
lot
yes.
earlier.
Very helpful. I would open it up if anyone in the public would like to ask a question or make a comment about where we stand financially halfway through the year. Katie?
Y'all should know by now I can't leave this money thing alone. I have no trouble balancing my budget because I deal with three-digit numbers. When it comes to the kind of numbers that Jane Reed deals with, I know it's much more difficult. Let me just ask this. What you have just presented, this budget adjustment, is a snapshot of what has happened since July 1st of 2011, projected through December 31st of 2011. You've looked at a
It's
snapshot.
projected through the end of the year.
June 30th, 2012.
Okay. So, okay. So it's for the, you're also projecting into this the next 6 months, just not the last 6 months.
Right.
Okay.
We have 6 months actual, and we're projecting that to make a 12-month projection.
Okay. How does this 12-month projection fit into our planned 2012-2013 budget?
Well,
let me just let you know what's going through my head. Here we have the budget that we said was for the 11-12 year. Then we said that we passed a budget for the 12-13 year. And you've given us, you know, an idea of what the adjustments and what the situation is for this one. How does this overlap or fit into the one for 12 and 13?
Some of the things that we'll have to think about for 2013 is that EVIP funding that we got this year that we didn't anticipate previously. Is that still going to be around in fiscal 2013? Are we still going to be eligible? So that's something notable. The other thing, personal property taxes have been talked about the last couple of years of them being eliminated. That's, you know, somewhere in the nature of 7 to 8% of our property tax income. So if that goes away, that'll be a huge number that we have to deal with. So when we go through any budget process, we're looking at hundreds of assumptions, both in personnel and external forces. But those two revenue items will be huge for us to deal with in 2013.
The 11-12 budget was based on the special millage of 1.5 mils, right? Isn't that what we were assessed in July?
An increase?
An increase of 1.5 mils?
3 mils.
3 mils.
Yes.
Okay. Is that the same projection for the 12-13 budget is 3 mils?
Not at this point.
What would be your thoughts on what the projection for that millage increase would be?
It's a little too early to really determine that, mostly based on that EVIP money, personal property. Those are huge figures that we'll still be dealing with. What was adopted was 20 mils, which returns it to the full authorized amount. But depending on that and some other revenue items, continued receipt of the collections from the court, you know, all those will figure into setting that millage.
And the mayor and the council, I think, have given pretty clear direction that they want to keep it as low as possible, the increase.
That's exactly where I'm coming from.
That's where I thought you were coming from.
Having been on the Financial Planning
I've known you
Committee
for a
and
little while.
campaigning mightily for the passage, especially based on maintaining our safety, police and fire. I know that the millage increase has been a hardship on almost all of the senior citizens I know, and I know a few. And I'm just very concerned about how, you know, the projections, the budget projections, and all the things that you have to deal with to figure it out are going to figure into any additional millage increase.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. All right, and no action needed on this? This was for presentation purposes only, correct?
There is a motion. There is a motion on the floor for
To accept.
to accept, but you can modify the funds, the transfers if you'd like. But modifying the budget as it stands allows department heads to work in the confines of their new projected budget. So you could approve the budget and just ask the funds be placed into the general fund for now, or you can I don't know if there's another motion they could make to at least accept the budget adjustments as they are, but the transfers to.
Those three transfers can be left out of the motion.
You could do that.
Okay.
So the things that I've heard that we may want to consider not adopting this evening are the $100,000 to the Public Improvement Fund and the $200,000 contributions to Major and Local Streets Fund. On page, I don't know what page it is. The second page, I guess, of agenda item 7A.
That is correct. Yes.
So I guess I'll move that. We can discuss it. I would move that we adopt the attached interim changes to the fiscal year end 2011 budget with the exception of the $100,000 transfer to the Public Improvement Fund and the $200,000 contributions to the Major and to the Local Streets Fund for a total of $400,000.
Is there support?
Yes.
Moved by Galloway and supported by Lennon. Any further discussion or questions on this item?
Well, I guess the other discussion is we can, this is the meeting that we traditionally make these adjustments, but we can make these adjustments next meeting or, 2 meetings before we adopt the final budget. I mean, we can do this anytime we want, right?
Right up until June 30th.
All right, and we may want to look at that again as things start to come into focus a little bit. I just think we should keep all our options open for a little bit longer anyhow.
All right. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Council members Piana?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. That concludes our regular agenda. Next on our agenda our regular agenda items. Next is call to council. Chief Collins, do you want to explain to us what these heads are doing on our table?
Yes, that is our traditional Christmas gift. There's also a coffee cup that they haven't come in yet, but we'll get one of those to every one of you when they come in. I would like to say thank you and goodbye to Councilwoman Baker. It's been an interesting period of time with you. I've had a lot of fun, and I really do think that you're a very strange person when it comes to city planning, because you really enjoy that. And I'm talking with an upper inflection just for you. But we will miss you very much over at the police department. We appreciate all the support that we had in very trying times, and you acted very professionally, very helpfully, and I really enjoyed working with you for the period of time that I've been chief, and certainly the time that I was captain. So we really will miss you.
Thanks, Chief. I'm sure we'll continue to have great adventures in other arenas.
Yeah, we've got other stuff planned.
Other stuff.
Thanks, Chief. Chief Sullivan.
I, too, would like to say thank you to Kate Baker for all your support and the short time we've had between us working together, but it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate your support and everything you've done for the city.
We've
Thank
had
you.
some crazy adventures already. My gosh. You've been tested in every way possible, I think, as chief just in this past year. So.
Yeah, it's been a busy one, that's for sure.
Yes,
but we
good job.
appreciate you and we'll wish you well in your endeavors, and I'll see you around town.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Chief. Derek, anything this evening?
Joined a long line of people here saying thank you to Kate, both. At least I didn't bring gifts like a suck up, but I didn't know we were supposed to. Especially, I guess, first as a staff member, I'd like to say thanks. I haven't been here very long, but the time I have been, it's been a real joy to work with you. Your professionalism, your protection, your support of staff is noticeable and something we and I certainly appreciate. And then from both me and my wife as residents, my wife wanted to pass along her thanks as well. She was sorry she couldn't be here tonight, but we've had a lot of respect for you as a council member, and certainly thank you for your time and your service to the city. So thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to continuing to work with you on the Ferndale Education Foundation Board, which you're a new member, and who knows, maybe on the Planning Commission too, just as a regular old civilian.
Jill, anything from the Recreation Department this evening?
Along with everyone else, just want to say good luck in your future endeavors and whatever whatever you choose to do. I know we haven't worked very closely together, but wish you good luck.
Thanks, Jill.
Christina, you're not a department head, but I keep looking at you. Do you have anything to share from the DDA this evening? Okay, if you'd like. I know you're like in the middle of your
She's
busy
going to be
season.
sharing a drink with me in about 15 minutes.
I know.
Exactly. Well, I think, first off, I want to say to Kate is that we'll welcome you back to the DDA anytime. Because that is definitely where I first met Kate, was volunteering for the DDA. So, and really, it's your passion for Ferndale, which makes people connect to you. They really kind of feel what you feel. They might not be able to say it as well as you do. So I think that's why people really look up to you. So we'll look for you in 2012.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Jane Marie, anything else that you wanted to add this evening? By the way, thank you for the presentation. Well done.
Thank you. Again, just to echo everyone else's thank you to Kate. Thank you for your support of the budget development process over the last couple of years. Has been strenuous, and I appreciate your support.
Thanks, Jane Marie.
Thanks, Jane Marie. Sherilyn, anything from our city clerk?
Kate, it's been a rough day. So I can't say a lot other than it's been a pleasure and a privilege. And I hope you will not be a stranger.
April McGrath, the city manager this evening.
Sure. Echoing everybody's thoughts, Kate, I'm going to miss you. You've made my time here very welcoming, and your open honesty and allowing me to offer ideas, and your candor has been great. So I really appreciate your perspective on so many things, and I hope that we remain in touch, and looking forward to working with you in a different capacity. A few other things real quick, just so you know, the chief and I, Chief Sullivan and I received the draft study of the Hazel Park Ferndale fire analysis and feasibility study. Right now, both Kevin and I are supposed to review it from our side of the operations standpoint and offer any commentary back to the CSI, correct? And as well as Hazel Park. So hopefully before we leave for the holidays, we'll get some kind of idea of when we could see a presentation from council to council and some next steps on that. So I would imagine probably in January we'd get some kind of feedback. We could have a presentation. The other thing too is kind of piggybacking a little bit on the budget presentation. Ms. Hubings has given all of our department heads the 2013 budget for them to review, to start to look through that and process that information, which leads me to very soon after the holidays you'll get some kind of budget, I would call it a calendar of sorts of when we need to meet to start doing that, so you can get an idea, which we can then revisit as well, what we talked about today. And I'll be working with the mayor to come up with some dates fairly soon for some goal-setting sessions, as I know many of you are probably trying to plan some times to ski or whatever it is that we do here in Michigan in the winter. So hopefully the next few, in between now and the holidays, we'll try to pull some folks here to see when might be some good Saturdays to meet on goal-setting sessions as well. So you'll be hearing from us shortly on that as well. And with that, I wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Our city attorney, Dan Christ.
Very briefly, Your Honor, I also want to congratulate Kate on her 4 years of service. Reflecting on your service to the city, 3 words come to mind. One, you've been prepared in all your tasks associated with the city, your honesty and integrity in the way you go about your job, and your enthusiasm for the job. From my perspective, the citizens of Ferndale have been very well served by you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Mike pointed out that was 4 words.
It was 4, Dan.
It was hyphenated.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. We're going to skip Kate. Melanie.
Yeah, I have a couple announcements. One, You may have read in the papers that there was a major decision made on transit down Woodward in this past week, and I've received a lot of questions about what does this mean for the current $2 million alternative analysis grant that the 6 cities from 8 Mile to Ferndale applied for and won.
8 Mile to 15 Mile.
What did I say?
8 Mile to Ferndale.
Yeah, very short distance. Yeah. 8 Mile to 15 Mile. And I just wanted to let everybody know that there is still a grant, there is still a viable study, but what we've been told via our project leads at SEMCOG through the Federal Transportation Administration is that we'll probably be looking at revising the scope of the study and maybe looking at some of the boundaries, expanding or decreasing. So we really don't know. We have a meeting this week to talk about the scope of work since the announcement, so we haven't even convened since that announcement happened. So I wanted just to reaffirm that there is still a study, we're still moving forward, and we're still working together. So, and then of course, Kate, you already know I'm going to miss you on council, and you'll continue to hear from me. And then I just wanted to say happy holidays and happy new year, and express my gratitude to the city staff. Really proud of what we've accomplished as council and staff this year, and we've had a tremendous change since the 2 years I've been on council, but in particular this year with a significant changeover in city leadership. And we've really had to learn how each of us operates a little bit differently and come together as a team. So I think everybody should end this year with saying, wow, we've accomplished a lot, and should be really proud of your accomplishments. So I wish everybody a great and safe holiday.
Thanks. Councilman Gallo.
Last time we were here, last Monday, Commissioner Covey, or Mayor Covey, as some of us call him, was here talking about a bill that passed the House of Representatives and now the Senate that would take away our representation and change it in Pontiac. H.R. 5187 was the House bill that was subsequently voted on and approved by the Senate, and the governor hasn't signed it, as far as I know. I took the opportunity to call Governor Snyder on, I don't know, last week sometime, spoke with his staff, and they were really polite, and they acted as though they were interested in hearing from us. The governor can be reached at 517-373-3400, 373-3400, or he can be emailed at rick.snyder@michigan.gov. And I think it's important for people who are affected by this, whether you're Republican or a Democrat, just to understand that if this goes through, at the very least, we're going to have less responsive county government, in that there'll be fewer folks up there representing us, representing more people. And so it may not be an opportunity to see our county commissioner on as regular basis and make our voices heard in the same way that we've historically been able to. So I encourage folks to call the governor at 517-373-3400 and at least let him know that it's important to us, and perhaps it won't be signed or will be vetoed. So keep that in mind as you go forward toward the end of the year. Kate, we're going to miss you. Sort of said a lot of nice things about you already, but it's been a real pleasure. And,
say more, say more.
And, well, we'll save some of that for later. But good luck in all you do, Kate, and you've been a great asset to the city, to the city council, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you. Councilman Lennon.
Well, the less I say, the quicker the mayor can buy that drink. Right? It's gone. We'll talk when we get up the street. However, I just want to say we've got roughly a week left to shop. Shop local, please. Please shop local. Right, Christine? Yeah. Okay. I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a very safe, Happy New Year. Okay? See you next year.
Thanks, Mike. I'll switch it around a little bit. I'll go next so that you can get the last word this evening, Kate. Here, I'll even hand you the gavel so you can end the meeting as you did back in January. I too just want to wish all of our citizens a Merry Christmas, a happy and safe holiday. Enjoy yourself. If you're wondering what we're talking about in terms of getting a drink, and if you're watching this live after the council meeting, we're going over to the Emery to bid Kate adieu in a more proper way. And so if you're watching on tape, don't go to the Emery, only if you're watching live tonight, but we'll be over there.
You could still go to the Emery.
You'll go to the Emery, but we won't be there.
Crystal would love you to
But please join us. Kate, it's been a pleasure, and I will hand the meeting over to you.
Getting wacky. I've been so sort of nonchalant about this whole thing, and it wasn't until really truly driving from work to City Hall today that it kind of hit me that this is kind of a big change. And all right, so I'm not so great at this, so we will try to do this and not sound like a fool. So there are a lot of thank yous, a lot of wonderful people that I've met and worked with, and first and foremost, the biggest thank you is to the residents of Ferndale. It has been such a pleasure to serve this city for 4 years. This is my hometown. This is where I grew up, across the street from Katie, and it's the community that I came back to after college, after never thinking I would ever come back to Detroit, and then suddenly realizing that I absolutely needed to come back to Detroit. So it has been a huge privilege that you have placed your trust in me. I've so appreciated all of the people that I've met and all of the interactions that I've had. And I'm not going anywhere, so I will still be here. Please do. Please darken my doorstep whenever you would like. I'm still on Beaufield Street. So my council colleagues, including the two who are not up here tonight, Tamiko and Craig, who I served with at the beginning of my term, have been so fantastically supportive. And I look at other councils around our region, and I am so proud of the way that we work together. And it doesn't mean that we rubber stamp things or that we don't have different opinions or disagree. It means that we are respectful and we talk them through and we keep what's best for the residents and for our community in mind as we make decisions. And that is something that I am particularly proud of, and something that I hope I had a hand in helping to craft on this council. My family and my parents, who are actually probably in Sterling Heights dropping my niece off at home right now, have been fantastically supportive. My dad, who told me he wouldn't vote for me when I asked him if I should run for city council, but who thankfully eventually came around and campaigned for me with all of his friends supporting me in a way that you don't expect when you're a kid, and you look at the grown-ups in your community and you don't necessarily realize that they think well of you and respect you. So thank you to my family for showing me that and for being so supportive and helpful and listening to my probably frequent complaints over the last 4 years. And probably the person who has had to hear the most complaints over the last 4 years is absolutely my boyfriend, Jeff. He has been the most patient man in the world. I think I am probably never home before 10 p.m. and he just kind of rolls with it. And I am just very, very lucky, and I will see him in about 15 minutes to have a beer at the Emery. There have just been countless friends and mentors who've helped so much in the community. But it has been a true pleasure and privilege to work with and, in all honesty, mainly to learn from our outstanding city staff. I am so proud to support you with my tax dollars. I am of the contingent that says tax me more. I want my city services to be strong, and it's because of you guys that they are strong. I have been through 3 city managers now, and always Shirley has been there to back them up. So thank you, Bob and Mark and April. 2 fire chiefs and 2 police chiefs, and the 2 that we have here with us tonight are wonderful. Any test has been met with the clear confidence that our city will not either go up in flames or, sort of be carried away on a tide of rebellion. You have no idea of how comforting it is to know that you guys are steering the ship 24/7. Thank you. The 2 planning directors. We've had so much change here. our planning directors and our planning commission in particular. I think, Derek, you are really going to have fun with our planning commission. And I thank you so much for the morale boost and the the beginnings of the reorganization that you're making in your department. People speak very highly of our community development department. Our outstanding city clerk, Sherilyn, who encouraged me to run as a write-in candidate right up until 2 weeks before the election.
No offense, Dan.
Sure. We'll miss you so much. And I'm sure we will talk more. Our recreation directors, now 2 recreation directors, so much transition. Our DPW director, who is kind of like that anchor, that rock who is here. The amazing woman who wears 3 hats, Jane Marie, the woman with the longest title in the city of Ferndale. Thank you so much for everything that you do and all of the late hours. It is not unnoticed that when I leave a council meeting at 10 o'clock, your light is still on. So thank you. Thank you very much. Our DDA, where it all kind of started when I came back and went, what do I do? Where do I volunteer? And Christina welcomed me and pointed me down this path of never being able to say no when people ask me to volunteer. So our wonderful event staff, and of course Judge Longo across the street, who scares the crap out of me. But you know what? That's what a judge is supposed to do. If I thought I volunteered a lot before, I truly had no idea how many things I would be invited to do as a city council person. So to my colleagues on the Planning Commission, on the Fern Care Board, on the Ferndale Education Foundation Board, on the Ferndale Democratic Club Board, all of the networks of other elected officials that I have been welcomed into, to our elected officials in Washington, particularly Sandy Levin, in Lansing, particularly Alan Lipton, and to the fantastic Women's Officials Network, who, as Melanie stated, is working to put more women in positions of elected power. Thank you. Just thank you for all of your collected wisdom. Okay. Like I said, I'm really not going anywhere, although I am looking forward to a greater involvement around the region, and particularly where I work in Midtown Detroit. I have a lot of friends who own businesses and who started nonprofits in our community, and that is where my attention will be focused now. So not going anywhere, rebuilding Detroit, putting that wacky urban planning degree to good use, Chief. So it went so fast, and I thank you again, and I'm going to stop talking because I know there's a drinking game involved in me saying or something, so I'll just...
That was me.
It might be you, so thank you again. And we've got the gavel one more time. Here we go. We're adjourned.
Good job. A firm here check for a couple $100 being set down. I was going down to